Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome back to 5 Before 5, where every week I share 5 ideas that blend expert insight from education, business, and health with the evergreen wisdom of Islam. For our 18th edition, I am going to be sharing 25 highlights from my final year in the classroom, a reflection on moving on, and a sneaky study guide for my final. I am approaching a bittersweet milestone. Next Friday will be my last day as a full-time classroom teacher. I've served many roles on 3 continents over the course of my 20 years as an educator: social studies teacher, tennis coach, 5th grade homeroom teacher, college counselor, ESL teacher, dorm parent, assistant head of school, and high school English teacher. It is this last one that brings me the most joy. My own 9th grade English teacher, Mr. Engel, changed the trajectory of my life by making me fall in love with language and believe in myself as a writer and a student. The other day I was playing soccer in the basement with my son, and I missed the goal so egregiously that I knocked a bunch of papers off the bookshelf. One was an advisor letter from Mr. Engel written to my father halfway through my freshman year in 1993. In lively language, he expertly mixed measured praise with appropriate constructive criticism in a way that both reassured me and motivated me to reach for greater heights. Here is Mr. Engel's letter. February 1993. Dear Weld, it's that time of the year when we customarily pause, not for a commercial break, but to attempt an assessment of where exactly each student stands after nearly a half year. You will not be surprised to hear that Marshall stands tall and strong. Indeed, he's rather burning the place up. Let me share with you a few comments from his teachers. Bill Glavin notes that of late Marshall has fallen off a bit in Latin, but the grade is still a solid B. A rapid introduction of new material may account for that slight drop. He's just begun Caesar, and this spring, through the Shakespearean lens, he'll get even more of that pompous gentleman. In science, Marshall scored a 93% on his final exam. That says it all with admirable succinctness. Mr. Lynch, Marshall's French teacher, notes that Marshall is one of the best French 1 students. He did make a few careless tests, hence the A- instead of a straight A. Mr. Lynch also comments that St. Mark should recruit more of this type of student, sentiment shared by his English teacher and advisor, and I hope by the next director of admissions. In geometry, Marshall's grades are 86, 89, and then 3 consecutive 99s. Needless to say, the grade is a straight A. In English, as in Latin, one might detect a slight falling off reflected in the B+ instead of the customary A-. But this is hardly anything to arouse anxiety. A possible source of anxiety may be that Marshall's roommate is now out of study hall and will be quote-unquote studying in their room. So we're going to have to monitor this situation very closely. And he finishes the letter with a few other comments. I went into teaching, at least in part, in the hopes that I could have a similarly profound impact on my students. For 34 years, my mother taught English at the Windsor School, an all-girls prep school in Boston that is considered one of the country's finest, and I would swell with pride when young women she had taught credited her with laying the foundation for their remarkable achievements as adults. While helping students navigate the college process is extremely rewarding, it is somewhat more cerebral and transactional. It is in the classroom where I feel I have left the most indelible impression on the hearts and minds of my students. With all this said, why would I possibly make the decision to move on from the classroom? There are myriad reasons, but here are a few. I yearn to share my skills and knowledge with a much broader swath of the Ummah than I can from within the walls of a school. I want to have an equity stake in my own life and be able to make decisions unencumbered by anyone's agenda but my own. My children are getting older and expenses are starting to pile up, and taking the Baraka discount by working as a teacher at an Islamic school is becoming less and less sustainable. The pandemic showed me the freedom of the work-from-home lifestyle, and this made dealing with the daily frustrations of school life considerably more grating. It also showed me the promise and opportunity of teaching online. Finally, while I may be moving on from life as a full-time classroom teacher, I will always be a full-time educator. And I aim to design my new company, 5 Before College, in a way that I will continue to teach throughout the year. When students and families opt in for my classes and consulting services, and you can book a meeting by clicking the link in the newsletter, My hope is that they will be even more invested than many of my current students who only attend school because they have to. This way, I can help teenagers across the country and around the world learn how adopting an Akhira orientation can lead them to achieve the highest levels of success, both here and hereafter. So, this brings me to next Friday, my last day. Knowing this was my swan song, I did things quite differently this year. I did not focus as heavily on some of my English staples like grammar, sentence diagramming, and literary terms. Parker Palmer famously said, "We teach who we are," and I have fully embraced this philosophy this year. While I have never taught the same class twice, this year I really followed my passions. Whenever I would learn something on a walk or a podcast, I would try to incorporate it into my curriculum. Above all, I tried to make everything we did relevant and connected to the real world. Other than our traditional study of David Popkin's fantastic Vocabulary Energizers textbook, there were 5 features I focused on this year: literature, quotes of the week, poems of the week, gratitude journals of the week, and a hodgepodge of real-world topics drawn from podcasts, YouTube, newsletters, and more. Next Friday is the day of my final exam, and I just created this whopper of a study guide. For this week's 5 before 5, I thought I would really lean into the number 5 and look at 5 highlights from each of these 5 areas. I hope that some of my more perceptive students might even use this to help them study. Number 1, 5 selections from this year's literature. First, Dead Poets Society. My aim as a teacher is to be as inspirational and influential as Mr. Keating, the iconic English teacher played by Robin Williams. I feel like one of his assertions has become my mantra as I seek to instill a love of literature in the hearts of my STEM-oriented students. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are all noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. And you can see 2014 Apple ad that used Dead Poet Society to introduce the iPad to the world. Second, A Separate Peace. This John Knowles novel is set at a fictional boarding school in New Hampshire during World War II. The real-world specter of war forms the backdrop of the complicated rivalry between Jean and Finney. The relationship parallels some of the internecine struggles that I often see plaguing students who see academics and school as a zero-sum game where your gain is my loss. Number 3, the Serial Season 1 podcast. I've been teaching the story of Adnan Syed and the alleged murder of his girlfriend Heyman Lee every other year since Serial first came out in 2014. The real-life story of a Muslim teenager leading a double life who gets caught up in a true crime mystery never fails to captivate my students. Alumni routinely text me with updates as his story continues to evolve. One just sent me this picture from last weekend's ICNA convention in Baltimore. Catcher in the Rye. My 9th grade class was a challenging bunch this year, and I wanted to teach them this anthem of a cynical teenager lashing out at the phoniness of the adult world. This was the first time I had reread this classic since my youth, and I was struck by how much my understanding of mental health and depression helped me empathize with Holden this time around. And 1984. George Orwell's dystopian vision of Big Brother introduces memorable concepts like doublethink, the 2-minute hate, and thought crime to sketch out a terrifying picture of where society could be headed. This book always leads to great discussions about the surveillance state and the ability of media to distort public perception. Second, 5 memorable quotes of the week. The first one is, "There will always be someone who doesn't see your worth. Don't let it be you." This is more of a bumper sticker quote than a literary one, but it reinforces one of my central messages to my students, that our mindset and self-conception determines nearly every aspect of our lives. Second, prizes bring bad luck. Academic prizes, prizes for virtue, decorations, all these inventions of the devil encourage hypocrisy and freeze the spontaneous upsurge of a free heart. Baudelaire. I came across this one around the time of fall term academic awards, which always rankle some unrecognized students and sometimes corrupt the intention of others. It led to a great discussion about quantitative versus qualitative assessment, the everybody gets a trophy culture, and the place of grades in education. Third, those who have some means think that the most important thing in the world is love. The poor know that it is money. This one really split the class in half. The more romantic and idealistic side of me really bristles at the idea of the importance of money. But then again, that thought fully supports the argument of the quote. I have never known true poverty, alhamdulillah, so this teaches me to descend from my high horse. Fourth, if you put 10 people in a room and they have to choose an ice cream flavor, they're going to arrive at vanilla. There's always constant pressure to conform, but originality only happens on the edges of reality. So resist temptations and advice to play to the middle. The best work always comes from pushing the edge. Darren Aronofsky. This is great advice for teenagers and the rest of us, and the vanilla ice cream anecdote helps it stick in the mind. I'm constantly preaching to my students that it is I am constantly preaching to my students to lean into their weirdness. This is what will set them apart. And finally, if you meet a jerk, ignore them. If you meet jerks everywhere, every day, look deeper into yourself. Kevin Kelly. I really like the framing of this quote and feel that it might help those who feel the entire world is out to get them to reevaluate the source of the problem. Next, 5 riveting poems of the week. The first one, Scaffolding by Seamus Heaney. I read this brilliant poem at my sister's wedding and started off the year with it as our very first activity. So much of school is about scaffolding, but the goal is to ultimately let the scaffolds fall, confident that we have built our wall. Poison Tree by William Blake. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. If middle schoolers and the rest of us could internalize the message about the importance of releasing our frustrations and not bottling them up, the quality of relationships would skyrocket. Third, Dulce et Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen. This is an amazing poem that captures the utter misery of war in the most visceral language I can imagine. Bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge. It argues against the patriotic notion that it is sweet and fitting to die for your country. Fourth, Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. I can still recite this poem that I studied in the 9th grade from memory. It explores the poverty of arrogance by reflecting on the shattered remains of Pharaoh's monuments. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Youth and Age by Khalil Gibran. I was impressed by the insightful comments of my students when we studied this long poem, in which Gibran expertly shows how his views have softened and become more subtle as he has aged. In my youth I longed for the unknown, and for the unknown I am still longing. But in the days of my youth longing embraced necessity that knows not of patience. Today I long not less, but my longing is friendly with patience and even waiting. Next, 5 gratitude journal prompts that worked. You can see more about how I incorporated gratitude journals in a Medium article that is linked to the newsletter. First prompt. What problem do you face every day that no one has solved yet? What's your solution? What do you believe that other people think is crazy? These questions can unlock million-dollar ideas, and I am always amazed by what students come up with. Interestingly, nearly a third of them identified sleeplessness caused by the academic schedule as one of their central problems. I agree 100%. What's something specific you could teach? Think about a relatively random and specific topic you have an abnormal amount of knowledge about. This is a great question to generate college essays, as it gives students an opportunity to reflect on their unique interests. It is often difficult to see our lives from an outsider's perspective and to identify what sets us apart. This question often does. Third, generate 5 thoughtful, creative prompts that we could possibly use for future gratitude journals. I strongly believe in the value of crowdsourcing, and I was so impressed by the quality of the prompts that the students generated that I used/stole their ideas for over a month, a win-win that simultaneously makes my job a little easier and recognizes the talents of my students. Fourth, what would you still do even if you knew you would fail? This one is usually phrased as what would you do if you knew you could not fail? But I feel the above question, inspired by Seth Godin, is even more revealing. One of the main goals of these questions is for students to discover their most firmly held beliefs and values, and identifying something we would do even if we knew it would fail forces them to do just that. And finally, inshallah, if you make it to Jannah, paradise, what is the first thing you will do? There were a fair number of Muslim-specific prompts over the course of the year. This one led to some funny and poignant ideas as students reflected on a question that many had never considered. Next, we have 5 miscellaneous real-world topics. First one is building a Pechakucha. For this year's Muslim Rising Dawn event, students had to create a presentation about an inspirational Muslim figure from the past or present. I had the high schoolers create Pechakuchas, which is a Japanese style of presentation in which you have 20 slides that auto-advance every 20 seconds. The 20 by 20 format keeps presentations crisp and informative. Next, the Ryan Holiday Stoicism podcast. Stoicism, an ancient philosophy that asserts that we must focus only on what is in our control, accept the present moment, embrace impermanence, and see challenges as an opportunity for growth, is more needed than ever to make sense of the modern world. No wonder Bill Belichick is an acolyte. Third, the Curiosity Chronicle newsletter. Newsletters have been one of the big additions to my life this year. Hey, you're reading mine or listening to mine right now. And I have shared many of my favorites with my students and FBF readers this year. Twice a week, Sahil Bloom shares gems with his 400,000 plus readers, and I have used several with my students. His most valuable razors and spotlight effect were especially effective. Stone Soup and Entrepreneurship. Peter Diamandis, a renowned futurist and the founder of the Enterprise Foundation, argued that you can learn everything you need to know about entrepreneurship by reading Stone Soup, a children's book. In it, 3 soldiers managed to unite an entire village that was initially unwilling to help by convincing them to add ingredients to stone soup, showing that enthusiasm and a captivating idea can help create something where nothing previously existed. And finally, copywriting from the $100 million swipe file. For our final unit, I co-taught a unit on writing copy with my friend and copywriter come poet, Patrick Benson. Students often wonder, why is this important, or how will learning English ever make me money? I wish someone had taught me the practical, fascinating art of writing advertisements that use solid research and an understanding of psychology to sell millions of dollars of products. That's it for this edition of 5 Before 5. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe if you have not already done so, and share with your friends. Talk to you next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.